Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Mark Caberti, founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. And before we jump into today's episode, let me ask you a quick question. How much would your life change if you could make 6 figures from your content? Imagine being able to quit your 9-to-5 job, do what you love for a living, and spend more time with your family. That's what we help our students do at the Content Marketing Plaza, an 8-week program that will help you build your way to 6 figures via your content. You can learn more about the Plaza by heading over to contentmarketingplaza.com, which will be in the show notes. All right, let's jump right back into the episode. When we think about building businesses, we need to think about what is the ideal business. And when I say that, I'm talking about, as today's guest will expand on in much greater detail, the kind of business where it's in the area that you're passionate about, but it's also something that supports your ideal lifestyle, because business, when you start one, it is a really big part of your life. So you want to make sure it is helping you move in the direction and achieve, that's the big one, also achieve your ideal lifestyle at some point. So today's guest who will be talking with us about this topic, he is an author and entrepreneur who has built over 25 different businesses, which include 2 entrepreneur franchise, 500 award-winning franchises. He got his entrepreneurial start by opening a personal training business and health club. Today, he coaches entrepreneurs to create their ideal business, one that allows them to earn more profits, have a greater impact, and enjoy more freedom so that they can enjoy life. He inspires entrepreneurs through his coaching program and best-selling book, The Ideal Business Formula. Today's guest for episode 318 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Pat Rigsby. Pat, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Wow, what an introduction. That's awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Pat, I'm really happy to have you on the Breakthrough Success Podcast, and we're going to be putting in so much work to grow our businesses, to create products, create content, all these different things. So we might as well make them ideal since we're putting in so much time anyway. So we're definitely going to go into that. Before we do, though, I'm wondering if you could share with us the backstory behind the Ideal Business Formula and how that teaching came around.
Yes, so I, as you alluded to, I have founded or co-founded a number of businesses in the sports and fitness and health landscape, everything from education companies and equipment companies to 2 award-winning franchises. But what I kind of found myself doing, or at least where I arrived at, was a point where I was just kind of a prisoner of my own success, if you would. I'll be the first to admit that all the stuff that I and my team were able to grow, it far exceeded anything I probably could have imagined professionally. But I found myself feeling consumed by work, feeling, just the burden of stress and responsibility. And doing a lot of things, spending a lot of time on things I just wasn't excited about. All the reasons that I wanted to own a business, beyond just the monetary side of it, it felt like I just wasn't getting to spend a lot of time on those anymore. And so, I had a bit of a wake-up call. I looked, I had one aha moment. It was very poignant to me. I was out pitching wiffle balls to my then 3-year-old Alex. And, and I was feeling guilty. It was the late afternoon, and I was feeling guilty. Man, I should be in working. I should be moving the business forward. I'm the one who is the driver for the business success. And then it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I said, what's wrong with me? I'm feeling guilty because I'm out here spending quality time with my son. And, I had, a 12-year-old as well at the time. Now one is 17 and one is 8, but, and I just remembered how quickly 3 turned into 12. And I said, man, I'm not willing to do that. Something's wrong if I'm feeling guilty for, about spending time with my family. And I feel like I'm not fulfilling my obligation to them. I mean, yeah, I have an obligation to my, the clients, the customers, the franchisees, the staff or team members. But first and foremost, I have an obligation to the people under my roof. And so I needed to step back and say, what should this look like? I know how I got to this point, but if I can do this, if I can build this enterprise that it involves so many people and reaches so many people, if I'm capable of having that sort of accomplishment, well, then can't I build something that supports my family as well? Not just financially, but emotionally. It provides them the quality of life and my opportunity to mentor them or to spend time with them, while also having an impact professionally and fulfilling all of those professional goals.
And it's really interesting you mentioned that guilt and that initial point where you were like, hey, wait a minute, like the business is really great and I really love what I'm doing, but I also have to be able to spend time with my family. And that is something that a lot of people do struggle with. I mean, you mentioned not just financial, but also the emotional side. And I think a big example of people struggling with doing both of these things is with the golden handcuffs, where you see someone making like a mid-6-figure income at a job or at a corporation, but then they get home late and they don't get to spend time with their family. And it's really great you mentioned that how 3 can turn into 12 really quickly. So I mean, when I think about like spending time, like doing your work with your family and all the other different things, like the one word that immediately pops up into my mind is managing all this different stuff throughout your day. So how can we get so good at the time management side to the point where our businesses are growing and we're also able to spend time with our families? Because many people operate life or think that they have to trade off one for the other.
Well, I think there's a bit of a process, right? I think first you have to get clear on what success looks like to you. And I don't think that at that point I was really clear about what success as a whole looked like to me. I would look at various segments of my life, personally or professionally, and I might say, okay, if we have this many franchises, that's successful. If we're doing this much top line revenue, that's successful. But I didn't look at it as a whole, knowing that anything that you're doing personally affects what you're doing professionally and vice versa, right? I mean, there's only so much of you to go around. So I think getting clear about what success is in a well-rounded way and making sure that you understand that with any thing that you pursue, you're essentially saying no to something else. I mean, we've all heard the whole, if you say no, you say no to good in order to say yes to great. Well, it like most cliches are pretty true. So you need to get clear about what you're going to say yes to. And then once you have this focus, you have to reverse engineer your plan. So you're basically building your schedule, you're investing your time around the things that are going to move you towards the outcomes that you want. And I understand this sounds so simple, but it's not the way that most people behave, right? Yes, it's very common sense. It's not common practice. Most people are very reactive, or they just chase bigger. They don't necessarily pursue better. And most people set professional goals with no thought towards how that's going to affect them personally. They say, well, okay, I want to go take my business from $1 million annually to $5 million, but they don't have any path to doing it other than saying, I'm going to work 5 times as hard or 5 times as long to get there. And the reality is you have to be able to develop a plan that's going to get you where you're going and pursue that plan within the constraints of the time that you have available. So if you know where you want to go and you have some focus, then it's easy to be proactive rather than reactive. It's easy to say, okay, here are the 2 or 3 things that I'm going to do today that are going to have the biggest impact on moving me towards the business and the life that I want. And if, you just stack up winning each day, and that's kind of a phrase that I default to. If I can take 2 or 3 steps every day towards the success that I'm pursuing, at the end of the year, I've made so much more progress than the person who's scattered, trying to do everything and essentially putting out fires and being reactive to everything around them. And really, that's how I think you can most effectively pursue what you would consider ideal without burning yourself out, without wearing yourself down, and really being neglectful of one side of your life to be successful in another.
And it is interesting you mentioned we do set these professional goals, and I encourage everyone to set goals in every single episode. And I feel like we understand that goal setting is a good thing, but if you set these goals like really high, I mean, you also have to think about the personal aspect. I mean, Pat mentioned, like, do you work like 5 times harder now to accomplish your goal? Do you now have less time for your family? Do you feel guilty about playing wiffle ball with your child? I mean, setting professional goals is great, but think about how they affect the rest of your life. That's something very important, as Pat mentioned. And one thing that I mentioned about Pat going into this episode is that, I mean, he's built over 25 different businesses. And some of those businesses, like 2 Entrepreneur Franchise 500 winners, like really incredible. So I'm wondering if you could share, like, how were you able to build over 25 different businesses? What are, like, do you have some kind of formula that you take each business through as you build it from idea to success story?
I think that good businesses all start by solving a problem, right? And so maybe the way that I look at it's different, maybe it's not, but a lot of people just kind of pursue things that they're excited about, or they see something that's interesting. I think about almost all those businesses were in, or have been in this, kind of a fitness industry or health and fitness industry landscape. So, I knew and continue to work with that audience in many ways. I know that audience pretty well. So I know what problems they're trying to solve. So if I can effectively solve a particular problem in a way that is really valuable to them, if it merits, a continued investment on their part, an equipment company really is just, for example, solving a problem. Trainers going to buy equipment. So how can I solve that problem differently or better than other people in the market? Certification companies, one of the companies that I founded or co-founded actually was a youth fitness and sports performance certifying body. Well, what we were finding was the youth fitness and sports performance market was now growing relative to, people seeking private instruction, or people, leaning on coaches or trainers to provide, personal training or group coaching, or, so there were more professional opportunities to serve that market, but most of the education at that point was geared towards training adults. And so now there was a very specific problem to be able to solve. How can we solve it? How can we put a better or different solution in the market? And then, obviously, if you can solve a problem better or differently and you can do it profitably, you have the foundation of a successful business. Obviously, all the other fundamentals of successful business go into play. How are we going to attract client, or how are we going to attract prospects? How are we going to convert them into paying clients or customers? And how are we going to deliver that dream come true result or dream come true solution through an experience that makes the client or customer happy? Like, that's kind of the process, but we got to decide what problem we're trying to solve first.
And a big emphasis on that is the problem solving. And I feel like problem solving, it's not something completely new. I feel like people have heard that before. It's just really implementing that, really knowing what problems your audiences have. I mean, I know, Pat, you mentioned that you know the problems that the people in your audience have, which makes it easier for you to provide those valuable solutions instead of just throwing all this content out there, or products and things like that, and seeing what sticks. So I'm wondering if you could share with us, how can we get deeper into discovering what the problems are that our ideal avatars have?
So, we start with this concept of an avatar because, it's a hypothetical person, right? Like it's a person that doesn't exactly exist, but it's kind of this aggregation of all the traits and characteristics of the people that we want to serve. Well, once we attract that person, now we have the ability to actually learn about them, and not just what we think they want to solve, but what do they actually feel? What are the questions going through their mind? I ask people all the time, what would be a dream come true result for you? What would be, 12 months from now? And it's a variation of, if you're familiar with the Dan Sullivan question, wonderful question that I think gets to the point of what people are looking for, but just simply asking people repeatedly, what would be a dream come true result for you? And then following up by saying, well, what do you think needs to change or happen for you to have that? And so what we're doing is, instead of saying, well, this is what this person should want, we get to understand what they actually do want, what they feel like their pain point is, what they feel like their limitation is. So, I mean, because I work a lot in the health and fitness world, a good example might be, if you ask somebody what a dream come true result would be for them, and they tell you they want to lose 30 pounds and they want their clothes to fit differently and they want to feel better about themselves. Well, you may have, as a fitness professional serving them, you may have this preconceived notion of what it's going to take for them to get there. But what you have to be cognizant of is buy-in, right? So what do they think needs to happen to get there? Maybe they think that they just need consistency and motivation and accountability. You may be thinking tactically, like they need this particular diet or they need this particular type of workout, whereas they're just thinking like, man, I just don't want to get out of bed at 5:30 in the morning and go to the gym. So, understanding what the perceived problem is allows you to give somebody what they want, but then ultimately kind of mix in what you perceive them as needing.
And it's really interesting that you mentioned sometimes we have this perceived idea of what people want. And it's definitely easier when we have this idea of an avatar, because then it's easier for us to think of our audience, this encompassing group of people, as an individual person. And if you serve that individual person, it definitely becomes easier. Learning more about your audience through things like surveys, that can make a really big difference for solving their problems. And going back to people who, I mean, most people, you listening to this episode right now, you may have a business that you're trying to grow or a side hustle. And a lot of people who are in those kinds of scenarios, they are wondering, how can they do more? How can they accomplish their goals? But some of them may feel like it's not necessarily working right now. So I'm wondering if you could share with us, what do you believe holds most people back from being able to reach their full potential and that big goal that they're after?
Well, it's a wonderful question. I'm glad you touched on it, because really it's kind of a three-step or three-component process. The first is clarity about what that goal actually is. When I talk to people about goals and say, well, okay, what do you want? Invariably, I get answers that are essentially more or less of something. I want to work less, or I want to make more money, or something like that. And that's not a goal. That's a dream. That's very abstract. Saying I want to work less is different than saying I want to take weekends off, or I've averaged working 54 hours the past year. I want to work 46 hours a week next year. So getting very clear about what the goal is, because if we can't quantify progress towards it, how do we know if what we're doing is actually working? So I think being clear, being very specific about what we're pursuing is number one. But then number two, I think you must develop reverse engineer a process to get there. And admittedly, if the goal is big, if the goal's, this place that you've never been close to yet, if you're trying to double your income or something like that, well, you may not know the exact path, but you can certainly give yourself a map, understanding that very much like GPS, there's probably going to be some rerouting along the way, but working that all the way back to where you are. One of the things that I do when clients say, okay, we're going to set annual goals, right? So we get clear about what that is, and then we say, okay, what are 3 to 5 steps that we need to take to get there? But then we break it down to, well, what are we going to do within the next month? What can we accomplish then? What can we accomplish in the next week? And then we break it all the way down to, what will you do within the next 72 hours to make this happen? And getting them progress and momentum out of the gate keeps them moving, because most people, somewhere around New Year's, maybe they'll write new goals, they'll put them on the wall, or they'll have them as their, the wallpaper on their computer or their phone or something like that. But they just sit there. They essentially collect dust instead of saying, okay, this is a living, breathing thing that I'm moving towards each and every day. And then finally, just staying focused and consistent. I think that most business people that are successful, and you're a wonderful example of this. I mean, think about that. You said, okay, I mean, with the frequency by which you do podcasts, and by which you're doing other social media things, there's consistency with that, right? And consistency is, I think, the hallmark of almost all great businesses or business owners. So if you're making small incremental progress towards your goal every day, not only are you gaining momentum, but you're learning, right? Like the person who does 3 podcasts a week obviously is getting a lot more opportunities to practice and improve and learn than the person who does a podcast episode 1 week and then they take off 2 weeks and then they come back the next week and do 2. I mean, consistency allows continuous improvement. And me coming from, before I got into business, as I mentioned to you before we jumped on the podcast, I was a college baseball coach. And, I mean, practice is everything, right? Like if you practice something consistently, that's how you're going to improve. So the people that are going to do best in goal achievement are the people who are practicing or essentially making progress, small incremental steps each and every day.
And I really like this focus on breaking it down, because saying something like, I want to make more money, like what does that mean? If I give you $1 bill, you hit your goal. Well, if you want to say I want to make X dollars, that's closer, but like how do you do that? What are some of the actions you could do, as Pat mentioned, within the next 72 hours? So really breaking it down and getting more consistent with what you have to do each day to reach your big goals can certainly make a big difference. Another critical part of success are the habits that you develop along the journey. So I'm wondering, Pat, if you could share with us some of the habits that you have developed that you would consider essential to your success.
The first is writing. I know you're very much a content marketing expert, so I think you probably embrace similar things. But I've written a daily email newsletter to, the list that I serve or my audience, every day without fail for 14 years. So just that consistency, obviously, in that habit has allowed me to get better and better and better, but also it's allowed me to build a relationship with people over time. So that's one. Number two, always, really since the mid 1990s, I have planned my day the evening prior, and I use a paper planner and always have, because I want to disconnect from my inbox and my calendar and all that stuff, where sometimes we get pulled into being reactive, and I want to just be able to think and focus and plan my next day, and then every Sunday plan my upcoming week, so I can make sure I'm allocating appropriate time and resources towards the things that I want to achieve before I get pulled into the things that everybody else wants. And then really the last thing that is, I think, a very consistent habit for me professionally would be, this habit of really keeping score. I mean, coming from a competitive sports background, always having a scoreboard. Like, am I moving towards what I want to move towards? And that, a lot of people keep score as far as money, but I mean, I'm keeping score with everything from, okay, am I spending enough time with my family? Are we having enough experiences and vacations? I mean, I want to make sure that I'm booking those things, and we're going and doing that, because it's so easy for time to get away from you if you don't plan it. So I keep score on pretty much everything because it allows me to just track progress. So I would say those, and then just, I'm an avid reader that, I try to read 1 to 2 books each week. Those are probably the foundational habits that have helped me most.
Thank you for those really interesting habits. I mean, I really like all of them. They're really great. Like, I like that focus on our time and keeping score, because, I mean, if we really lose track, it's very easy for the time to just fly by. And writing, that is definitely something that I could also relate to as well. A lot of people who can relate to that are also authors, and there are a lot of great books out there for us to learn from. So with that in mind, Pat, I'm wondering if you could share with us 3 books that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
So the first book, The Wizard of Ads, was the first marketing book that I really embraced that helped me tremendously, by Roy H. Williams. That was just an absolute game changer for me. The second book, which is a relatively recent book that has come out, called 59 Lessons from Fergus Conley, who's trained some of the most successful athletes, some of the special ops organizations, everything else, and lessons he's learned from working with all of them through, about performance and teamwork. And then Ready, Fire, Aim from Michael Masterson, which, that's his pen name. His real name is Mark Ford, if you're researching him. Just a wonderful book on scaling businesses through each stage. Those 3 books are go-to books for me that I've probably reread multiple times. Even the 59 Lessons, as new as it is, I've got through it a couple times just because it was that good.
Pat, thank you for sharing with us those great book recommendations. Those will be in the show notes, markberry.com/E318. We'll also throw in content marketing secrets in there for anyone who wants to learn how to grow and monetize their content brands. All of that will be in the show notes. And before we wrap up this episode, Pat, I've asked you a few questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to ask ourselves more often?
Am I moving toward the business and the life that I want? Am I actively moving towards that ideal business and ideal life?
Pat, thank you so much for asking us that great question and really thinking about how each action moves us towards that life that we want. And thank you so much for sharing all of your great insights throughout our time together. If you guys want to learn more about Pat, get your copy of The Ideal Business Formula. In addition to your book, where else can we find you online?
PatRigsby.com is obviously a very simple, kind of easy place to start. And then, we put together kind of a bundle where we are giving listeners a copy of The Ideal Business Formula at patrigsby.com/breakthrough. So we'll have that just so people can start to think about what ideal is for them, and we can help move them towards that.
Pat, thank you for sharing those resources with us. And thank you again so much for coming on Breakthrough Success and sharing all of your great insights with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been truly my pleasure.
Want to dominate the podcasting industry? Now you can with your free copy of my book, Podcast Domination. You'll learn how to launch, grow, and monetize your very own show. And whether you are a beginner or an expert, this book has a lot of golden nuggets for you. We'll cover the cost of producing this book. All we ask is that you cover the shipping. To get your copy, head over to markguberti.com/PD.